Hello, I'm Cheryl Hung, and you are watching the Cloud Therapist channel.
Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist Shorts. I'm Richard Simon. Today's topic is going to be all about MetaCloud or SuperCloud. Again, I have with me Cheryl Hung, and we're going to have a conversation around that and see what we can come up with. So, Cheryl, it's great to have you back on again. How are you doing?
I am really good. I'm really good. Thank you for having me back on once more. I always enjoy chatting to you.
Fantastic. It's lovely to have you on as always. So, Cheryl, just give us a quick sort of intro to yourself and what you do.
Sure. I work for Apple on Apple Cloud Services, but mainly I work around open source, Kubernetes. I advise some startups, and I'm the founder of Cloud Native London, which is a meetup which has over 6,000 members. So if you are ever in London sometime and want to come and hang out, please do come and say hello.
Fantastic. So all the descriptions for all that stuff will be in the video descriptions, all the details for the links and so on for that as well. So Cheryl, let's dive into I think the kind of one of the things that the reason I kind of wanted to have the conversation with you about sort of the MetaCloud or the SuperCloud. We need to decide, I think, on one of those. I'll probably stick to MetaCloud. I think otherwise it's kind of taken too long to mention the title. There was actually a InfoWorld article which kind of mentioned this particular subject, and it kind of called it the next frontier in cloud computing, or I think words to that effect. And again, I'll provide a link in the description for the article. And in a kind of very fortuitous way, I was doing the AWS FEST event recently, and one of the other presenters was also actually mentioning sort of the MetaCloud as well, and kind of had some sort of ideas around sort of how that would fit in with kind of the existing sort of architecture. So what's kind of, when you sort of looked at the article, actually first, kind of what was your thinking around sort of the idea of a MetaCloud or a SuperCloud?
So I'll be honest with you. Before you shared this article with me, I had not come across the term MetaCloud before, at least not in a kind of futurist, not in a like near future way. So when I read it, I think my first instinct was to be a bit sort of like, what is this thing? Be a bit
skeptical.
Or a bit skeptical about it. For instance, it says, this is a layer above multi-cloud, but it's not quite multi-cloud. I mean, you have multiple clouds underneath it. And perhaps there are some aspects to it like governance that is part of MetaCloud, but does that not also apply to multi-cloud? So I think my first reaction to it was like, if we're going to name something, we should be precise. Like, what is this MetaCloud?
Yeah, and I agree with that. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it's, if it's something that is seriously being considered, it's very early days. And then you've kind of got to maybe think about, okay, so how does this get implemented? And then what would be, shall we say, lack of a better word, what would be kind of the responsibilities of a MetaCloud? What are the functions and features of a MetaCloud? What gets done at that layer and then gets dictated down to multi-cloud? So if you have Cloud A, Cloud B, Cloud C, that you have sort of invested in, or that you're doing work in, you have workloads in, where do we kind of draw that sort of distinction in terms of some of the functions and activities that you'd be doing? Do you kind of continue some of those in those clouds, or do you kind of move those up to the next layer up?
Right, because I've talked to quite a few people at different organizations who are doing multi-cloud today, right? They have multiple cloud providers, and perhaps they have some internal tooling that manages some common things between the two cloud providers that they're working with. But I get the feeling that MetaCloud is supposed to be an overarching layer that, I don't know, it's a bit hard to explain, I think.
Yeah, it's early. I think it's early days, isn't it? And I mean, I appreciate the the need for maybe having that. As my concern is more whether we're kind of just going to complicate things for the sake of complicating it and selling yet another thing. Whereas actually, I'd like it to be a little bit more considered, well thought out, and actually have a very kind of light touch when it comes to performing certain functions, and we allow the existing clouds that we've invested in and all the skills and all the tooling around those to continue doing what they're doing.
I mean, the article makes a very good point that multi-cloud is complex, and therefore there is definitely demand for something that can simplify it, that can abstract it away, that can perhaps take a gitops declarative approach instead of having to sort of maintain and worry about states across each one separately. So I see the value in this idea, but as you say, it's very, very, very early days, and the complexities of actually implementing something are always much harder than just saying, oh, we need a black box that's going to solve all our problems.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, as you said, kind of multi-cloud is real. I did a presentation at the DevOps conference recently, and just in the audience, I just asked for a show of hands, and I said, okay, how many of you got services that are running in production and cloud and public clouds? Lots of hands came up. How many of you have again the same thing but in multi-cloud and multiple clouds? And again, a decent amount of hands came up again. So sort of people put their hands up. So as you said, that's kind of a reality. Multi-clouds is a reality. Lots of people are doing it already, and we do have tools around that. So if you're running a Kubernetes cluster in in AWS and another one in Azure, there are tools and those kind of solutions from from vendors do allow you now to actually manage multiple Kubernetes clusters, for example. If that's kind of what you have, and that's what you want to do. And even the public cloud providers have kind of extended their management tools, their observability tools to be able to cater for that. So we do have that capability. It's just kind of beginning to sort of come in. I think it's probably come in for the last sort of 18 months. I've seen announcements from lots of the sort of Kubernetes distribution vendors to actually do that. So why can't we just kind of do it with Kubernetes?
Well, I think we also sort of had this idea that if you're going to do some kind of MetaCloud thing over the top, you need the cooperation of all the cloud providers, because those cloud providers need to integrate all of their services in such a way that it reveals information about the state of the system upwards, and the MetaCloud can handle it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean that would need a a SIG or an org or something. I think an interest group or some kind of meta group that will pull in all of the. Sorry about that. That was a bit cheesy of me, but that will kind of we'll need to kind of pull in all of the public cloud providers, some of the household names when it comes to tooling, like Nginx and Terraform, with HashiCorp and people like that. We're kind of quite ubiquitous.
I just love it. So household names is like probably your household, my household might know these names. Maybe not every household.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, being slightly whatever with that. Yeah. But yeah. So it's not a common household.
I will say, like, I think people assumed that cooperation wasn't possible. Kubernetes showed that it is possible for competing cloud providers to come together and build a common solution that works across the cloud providers and abstracts away the underlying complexity. So I want to be sort of mildly optimistic and say, although it's hard, it's happened once before through the power of open source. So maybe it could happen again.
Yeah, and I mean, even the data center sort of vendors or players in that space have provided integration modules and providers and so on, whatever you call them these days, for Kubernetes, so that a Kubernetes cluster can and Terraform and things like that, kind of infrastructure tools can actually address those platforms as well, if necessary, if you're kind of doing stuff in a hybrid environment or just in the data center or something. So I think that's there, but kind of doing this with in a kind of a meta group, I'm not sure how sort of willing will be the sort of all of these vendors and the public cloud providers to kind of want to come and kind of spend time doing that as well. And there needs to be kind of benefits. You kind of need to do the payoff thing as well.
Well, yeah, of course, you have to incentivize all the players. What would a cloud provider get out of abstracting everything that all their secret sauce, all the competitive advantage, and giving it up to something like a MetaCloud that could treat all cloud providers as interchangeable. I mean, again, Kubernetes, maybe it was a lightning in a bottle moment.
Maybe
it happened, and maybe it could happen again.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe might be lucky twice. Something.
I mean,
lightning strikes twice.
Yeah. on a completely like visceral level, I do not love this name MetaCloud.
I have some alternatives which I'm going to run by you in a minute. So we'll do that. Okay. We'll do that. But yeah, so just going seriously back for a minute. The idea was to kind of I think abstract some of the kind of things that maybe organizations have not been good at doing, and maybe the sort of the vendor space has not paid as much attention to. So things like governance, security, policy. I think you mentioned in previous conversation federation kind of approach to things as well.
Yeah, federation was like the idea that you could run sort of clusters of clusters, let's say, and manage the security and governance at a higher level than on an individual cluster. I would say it probably hasn't taken off to the extent that it was hoped. I don't exactly know of the reasons why, but one of my guesses is that it is just a very complex problem.
Yeah, I agree, and I would have thought that this kind of extra layer would need to be also a two-way street. It can't be just that we sort of apply, sort of policy from the top at this MetaCloud layer, and then we just kind of forget about, we just applied the policy, we just applied sort of the security, governance or whatever that we're doing, and that's it, and we just kind of forget about it. It obviously needs to be surfaced back up again so that we know that it is still there, that there isn't any drift. I think that's kind of one of the sort of terms that is kind of quite common these days in terms of what we applied to that particular policy and that sort of governance. So that, I think, it would need to be a two-way street. You need to kind of apply it, but then you kind of need to kind of get data back, information back, that desired state is still kind of still down there, still being applied.
Yes, 100%. I mean, you need, if you're going to apply stuff from the top, then you need sufficient observability to make sure that that running state is what you expect it to be. And that's why I mentioned gitops before. That's kind of the declarative style. But the cloud providers don't expose all of the information that they have publicly for very good reason. So again, that's why you would need that cooperation with all the cloud providers in order to build something that could truly claim to be an abstraction layer away from all of them.
Yeah, and then also, I'm also sort of thinking about which vendor is going to be brave enough to come and do this, want to do this, and actually kind of dive into the sort of the MetaCloud sort of idea and say, hey, we can, we've been doing observability. Hey, let's kind of, take it up a notch as well and do MetaCloud observability or, governance or whatever you want to call it at that layer.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And yeah, what are the incentives for them to do so?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's kind of probably as much as we can say about MetaCloud at the moment, because it's so So light on,
Abstract.
yeah,
Yeah.
abstract and light on information. So I did promise some non-serious alternative names to the MetaCloud. So let me run these by you and see what you think. So how about UltraCloud?
Ultra cloud. Okay. It sounds a bit like a product that you could purchase, like buy today's ultra cloud,
UltraCloud,
you
yes.
know?
Yes, next to the dishwasher tablets or
Exactly.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Ultra
Okay.
cloud powered
Okay,
by
I've got it.
ultra this
So they
planet.
said this, yeah, they said they said SuperCloud, I think in the article as an alternative. But what about SupraCloud?
Super
Yeah,
cloud. Okay.
SUPRA cloud. That kind
Yeah,
of
okay. I
sounds
can
a bit
definitely get
more
behind that.
slick. You know, a
Yeah.
car, sort of a car. It's like a car name, Supra. The Ford Supra.
I like super.
The
Super
Tesla
could be there.
Supra.
Tesla super.
So SuperCloud. Okay. How
Okay.
about HyperCloud?
I think hypercloud is done, surely. Like it's got a name. It's done.
Okay, so HyperCloud is no good. Okay. And last but not least, MegaCloud.
Mega cloud. Mega
Well, I
cloud.
told you they'll be cheesy.
Yeah. No, I think what does mega cloud remind me of?
Mega City One from Judge Dredd or something.
Yeah, it has
I'm gonna
that
get all the
feeling.
Judge Dredd guys now talking to me and sending me messages.
Well, I think super cloud. I'm going with super cloud.
SuperCloud is
I
the
definitely
winner.
like it more than meta cloud.
Fabulous. I'm gonna quickly write an article and knock it out on some
Exactly.
digital magazine so I can say, oh, I mentioned it first on my
Exactly. You can
on my
claim
podcast.
to build the next billion-dollar industry.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Excellent. Okay, well, Cheryl, I really appreciate your time on this one. It's been kind of a fun way to end it, and yeah, interesting, interesting area to discuss.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time.